This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland front of the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Cleveland Cavaliers, losing is back for them, and so am I. Is there a correlation? Who's to say? But the Chase Down is presented by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com. Joining me today is my co-host Carter Rodriguez, who picked up the slack and is part of the reason. I'm going to blame him entirely for any rust that I'm showing on this podcast. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
Buddy, you've been replaced. You've been upgraded upon, and I didn't miss you one bit. No, I missed you a lot. Glad to have you back. I'll tell you what, nothing like your co-host leaving to realize how much work your co-host does on the podcast. I'll tell you that much. Many a time would we be like an hour out from the pod and I'd open up our rundown and see it empty and go, oh crap, I have to do it this time. So I missed you dearly. Glad to have you back, even though like the Grim Reaper, you came bearing bad news. You came with a loss.
I did come with a loss. We left with the two of us podcasting after a signature win over the Memphis Grizzlies. The Cavs then went on extended winning streak, 6 more wins, and it ended with the loss against the Philadelphia 76ers. Big shout out to Chris Fedor, Jeff Namina, as well as David Zavak for filling in while I was gone. I thoroughly enjoyed all 3 episodes. I even listened to the trade deadline one after the trade deadline because
you're a true sicko.
I'm a chase down completionist at heart. I also want to give other shout outs to people that have done some good work recently. Go read Dan Devine, writing about Evan Mobley. Did a terrific job there, friend of the podcast, as well as Spin Davies, who did a great interview with Karis, and our friends at Wine and Gold Radio, who did a great podcast with Donovan Mitchell, as well as our buddy Matt Gold.
Yeah, I was about to say, don't you dare leave off the banner guest.
I would not leave him off, and I even left him the headlining spot. He was the final one there. So shout out to all the good work that's been going on with Cavs coverage. I felt very appreciative to have this podcast and a lot of good, interesting articles to read while I was away. Still was probably more tuned in with the Cavs than I should have been, but you know what? That's how I vacation.
Yeah, you almost wanted to be going amazing or terrible while you're gone. You know, amazing because you get to just consume Cavs content, or terrible because you don't have to try to talk about it.
Yeah, and the really remarkable thing was that trip had been booked since before the schedule came out, and it was really funny that it just so happened to be an 11-day stretch where they played, I think, 8 times in 11 days or something stupid like that. Like, just truly ridiculous. Of course, the trade deadline was in there too, not too eventful. Big change since the last time you did a podcast is the Cavs have officially signed Danny Green, and he made his Cleveland Cavaliers debut. And I guess we should also just kind of get the elephant in the room out of the way at the top end, which is that there has been reporting that the Cleveland Cavaliers and Kevin Love will be discussing potential buyout. That, of course, has not happened yet, and for that reason, we will not be discussing it yet. Honestly, as I'm making my return to the podcast, I'd want some time to gather my thoughts if that were to occur. But obviously, that's something potentially on the horizon here for the Cavs, and if that does in fact occur, that will certainly be something that we will be touching on in a future episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And for now, if the reports are indeed true, I will say I am just a little bit sad. But, obviously we'll wait to dive in, analyze once, if things become official. But, not the only bummer thing.
Oh my God. The bummer thing is you blowing the tire there with your voice. My God, buddy. Yes, the Cavs did blow it against the Philadelphia 76ers. Really a big opportunity for them, and probably the biggest game they've played in a while. They did have another big game while I was gone, which was the national TV game against the Pelicans, who were on a big winning streak going into that game. Good road win. But going back and watching this, because I started watching this Sixers game live in the fourth quarter, and then
what a time to start, brother.
Yeah, and then since then, I actually watched through it twice. I watched through the first three quarters last night, and then again today. What really jumped out to me was this is exactly why you want to have home court in the playoffs, starting in the playoffs, because I thought the Cavs played disconnected at the start of this game. I thought they were tense. There was a lot of turnovers and mistakes. To borrow a line from our buddy Ben Golliver, I felt like the Cavs were playing with purpose, but not a purpose. Like there was a lot of...
I always like Golliver's the best.
There was a lot of kind of overhelping. Like I thought the effort level was high, but actually Evan Mobley in particular was one of the guys that jumped out to me that just would unnecessarily leave guys to try to trap and to try to make a play. And I just thought the start of this game, they looked rattled and they looked like the team that had an experience deficit, and they just put themselves in a hole that ultimately they couldn't dig out of.
Man, that I've never seen Darius, Donnie, Evans brain short circuit like that all at the same time. They were... they would create an advantage on offense and just like literally like their brains would just stall out and they would just throw the ball like into three Philly defenders, not even like jumping passing lanes, just like throwing it to nobody. It was about as brutal of a first quarter as you'll see. Thought the Cavs maintained some connection, but didn't get much better in the second. And then, once Philly let up a little bit, I was proud of the way they fought back. But man, that first quarter and first half really was about as bad as they've played all season, and really maybe as bad as they played in the last two seasons for a single half.
Yeah, and one of the things that jumped out to me too upon the rewatch this morning was it wasn't like right off the bat they struggled and Philly just was a buzzsaw, right? Like they stayed close and connected for the first 5 minutes of this game and really kind of left a lot of opportunities on the table. A lot of those turnovers occurred at that time. And then you just had those breakdowns. There was the two Harden threes that I was actually fine with the defense on the Harden threes. I thought Okoro defended the one in the corner well, and there was the pick and roll dribble handoff jumper that he hit, which James Harden, he's a great offensive player, but leaving Tobias Harris wide open, I believe that was a Mobley kind of overhelping situation. That was brutal. There was another Tobias Harris one off an offensive rebound, and then there was one where Donovan just didn't provide point of attack defense. And I believe it was Milton that got by him. Jared Allen was forced to help, which meant Mobley was forced to help on Joel Embiid, and Milton hit a corner 3-point shooter for a wide open look. Those are the breakdowns that absolutely killed them. And even though the 3-point shooting was brutal at the start of the game and kind of normalized, when you give those kind of open opportunities, I lose sympathy in those spots. Like you have to understand your defensive principles. And it was similar to the Miami game. I thought it was a little disappointing to see Donovan not be kind of the composed vet in that spot. Like, funny enough, I thought it was actually Garland that probably had the best first quarter, and then I'd say the best game overall out of the Cavs core.
Yeah, but even Darius had a weird game in terms of assertiveness, Like, I felt like Agreed. It was a game where Darius really had it going, and, like, for whatever reason, like, yeah, I mean, to be clear, it's hard to nitpick 27 points on 14 shot attempts, 6 assists to only 1 turnover. But I think, you can kind of look at how aggressively Garland was asserting himself in this game by a few of those lines. Only 3 3-point attempts. Now he made all 3, but only took 3. Only had 6 assists to 1 turnover. That tells me he wasn't like, he just wasn't as involved in the offense as a guy who seemed to have it should have been. Maybe that was a little bit of Donnie forcing it. Obviously, in the second half, Donnie was really forcing it in a very good way, and was really, the facilitator for a lot of the runs that made it competitive. But I just thought it was a weird game for like almost everyone on the floor. Mobley had a total disappearing act in the first half, was just missing easy shots, throwing the ball away, and then found his legs in the second half. Just a very weird game. I think I wonder if a little bit, I always wonder this. They boat raced Philly at the end of November. Absolutely boat raced them. They were up 30 early in the third quarter of that game. And I wonder if Philly just came out a little bit more like focused, and a little bit more like, oh, these guys, they think that they have something for us, and they do not. We didn't have Harden. We didn't have Maxey. By the way, Maxey is flying up my Cavalier opponent fear rankings.
I think he's completely overtaken Terry Rozier at this point.
Yeah, has this man missed a timely shot against the Cavaliers yet in his career?
Yeah.
So, they just came out so sharp. Obviously, hitting 7 out of 8 threes. A few of those were wide open, which helps. But man, they were playing with purpose. I thought James Harden looked, Houston level good on ball in terms of his command of the offense, and absolutely cooked Evan Mobley in isolation. Which that's a matchup I would expect Evan to perform favorably in, and he just dusted him. Just looked really, really fresh. And they put it to him. I'm proud of the Cavs for fighting back, but Philly presents some interesting problems for them, and I don't think they did a very good job on Joel Embiid in this game either.
Yeah, I agree. And I think ultimately you're not going to win the Joel Embiid matchup if you go head to head with Philly. That's just one of those spots where I think you're going to concede an L there. But I think you have to win some of these others. Like Donovan Mitchell needs to be better than James Harden. If for some reason you played Philly, which we should be clear, it's very hard to see a path to that. It seems like Boston and Milwaukee are going to be 1-2 in some order, which means the Cavs and Sixers would likely have to meet in the conference finals, which if we get there and we have some problems, we can worry about that then. But even if you're talking about these individual games, Mitchell needs to be better than Harden in those spots. And you need Evan Mobley to maybe make up some of the difference as well if you're going to lose that Jared Allen, Joel Embiid one-on-one. And it's worth noting, Embiid isn't himself. He said it himself after the game. He was questionable coming into this game. That's even though he was still dominant, that's not the best Joel Embiid that you can see, and I don't think that's the Joel Embiid you'd see in a series. And Cavs have that on their end too, right? Like I think Darius, you see it with the lack of 3-point attempts, and I saw on Donovan's IG story that he was wearing the wrap in his off day on the thumb. So maybe Garland is going to really benefit from this week off and feel better. But this is the time of year, 60 plus games into the season, where everybody's playing with bruises. They're playing with strains and things that aren't right. And I just thought the Cavs didn't do a great job controlling what they could control early in this game. They let Philly kind of get them out of their identity and got them rushing, especially on the defensive end. And I thought that those breakdowns just ended up being way too costly.
Yeah, it was interesting. I feel like they just kind of didn't know what they wanted to do in this game on defense against this Philly team until the second half, when I think they calmed down a little bit. In that November game, again, it's very important to note, no Maxey, no Harden. That's about as mitigating of a factor as you'll find. But they really had a plan for Embiid. There was a ton of ball denial. There was a ton of bodies shaded in his direction on the catch. And I think with Harden and Maxey reinserted into the lineup, and the Philly just shooting really well, I think they didn't feel comfortable committing to that ball denial as much. There was just a lot of clean catches for Joe in that game, and he's gonna kill you with clean catches. He's just too strong. The help was coming in kind of more predictable spots in that game as well. He had 5 assists, which he is not a big assist guy historically in his career. I didn't feel like they had a strong belief system going into that game. And, and that's part of regular season. It's part of why regular season games are so hard. It's not like they've been game planning for this thing for weeks. It's just a natural
it's
byproduct,
football, right?
Yeah,
where you have 6 days off to create a game plan for a team and you go out there and execute, right? Like basketball is a little bit more of a war of attrition, and I think that's a smart point to bring up.
Yeah, so I just think ultimately I don't think they played the right style. There's just too much. Jared is a warrior, but this was just not not a favorable matchup for him in isolation against Joe. Like, you got to front, you got to, and I think maybe some of their inability to control at the point of attack, which I thought they'd do a lot better than they did, makes it hard to play those kind of styles. It's hard to focus on the second action when the first is killing you. So, it was just it was a tough game. It was a tough game. I don't know. Obviously, they also couldn't make timely threes when they needed them. Mobley specifically, normally I like Mobley 3-point attempts. This felt a little surrendery from him today or last night, where it was like, I am not very comfortable getting closer, so I'm just going to take these. And I don't
Honestly,
think
it kind of reminded me of the Wolves game,
Oh,
where
that's an interesting.
Mobley hurt his knee a little bit, so he didn't seem as confident going into the paint, and the Wolves just kind of really committed to blowing up the pick and roll and forcing Mobley pick and pop jumpers. And I thought Philly was doing a lot of the same things. And I agree with your assessment too. Like, I think the largest breakdowns for the Cavs happened at the point of attack, and the ultimate killing shot may have came on the second or third rotation within that set. But if you're not making the team work hard for that first rotation or for that first look within a set, you are going to surrender open 3-point opportunities, especially against a team as smart as Philly that really can get on fire from the 3-point line.
Yeah. It was a tough matchup, and I think a good learning lesson in a lot of ways. By the way, big B-ball Paul fan. I get why Sixers fans like that guy. Just a really, really active player around the rim. Nice touch, better touch than I thought you'd see. And those were the minutes where, that guy is +3, and you go, okay, whatever, he's +3, but like, you need to kill Philly when Embiid is sitting. And the only Jalen McDaniels and Maxey had negative plus minuses because they were on in the deluge in the fourth quarter, where the Cavs made it competitive again. But ultimately, I just don't think enough went right for this team.
Yeah, it was the showdown of two centers that should have been playing ahead of DeAndre Jordan with Jared Allen and B-ball Paul. But yeah, I think there is a variety of factors, right? Like you mentioned how many games that the Cavs played over the last 10 days. That's a factor. I think sometimes too, when you're playing weaker competition and all of a sudden you switch from Spurs to Sixers who are locked in and understand that, hey, we drop this game, we lose the tiebreaker to Cleveland. They tie us in the standings, right? Like when you go from weaker competition to these big statement games, sometimes I feel like you don't come out looking your best. I mean,
dude, I always felt like the Warriors had an advantage on the Cavs back in those finals days. Yeah,
you come off a series where you're not playing a good team, where you're playing someone like Toronto, and all of a sudden you just aren't sharp. And that's why you drop those games 1 and 2 in 2016. And then a similar thing with Boston, where you're up 75 points basically against the Celtics, and you didn't have to really have the level of focus and execution. But ultimately, like, whether you want to attribute it to that, whether you want to attribute it to lack of rest, if you want to attribute it to lack of experience in games like this, I think all of those were factors. But at the end of the day, it's a missed opportunity to get a statement win against one of those teams. And honestly, we're running out of games to have that. Like, I know we've had good statement wins. I think the game against the Pels was actually a very, very good win. I know they didn't have Zion, but they haven't had Zion for 2 years, and that's still a good team. They're still a top 10 team in net rating, and they were on a winning streak. But you're running low on these games that are real opportunities to kind of have a statement win. And if you don't capitalize on that, we're going to go into the playoffs with people having what I would describe it as some legitimate fears or concerns about this team's ability to execute against some of these teams. Now, you might not see them in the first round, but I do think that it's until you start seeing more proof of concept in these games, you're going to have some legitimate concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I all the way agree with that. They lost on the road to Philly. They beat Memphis in a really important game. They beat the Bucks with Giannis. Mm-hmm. They've beaten the Celtics twice. I think they have enough.
Well, I'm speaking just more kind of general concern from the fan base. Like when we talk to people, or even just the they've gotten back on the right
fan
track.
base is always really concerned, though.
Well, of course. I mean, I'm always concerned. I'm a nervous wreck half the time, man. But like, there just hasn't been a lot of consistent basketball prior to this winning streak. So I think people that were discounting the win against Memphis because no Jaren Jackson Jr., the discounting the win against the Pelicans because Zion was out, like people that are looking for kind of that one big win, they're going to have to wait a little bit longer. And it sucks going into the All-Star break with that being the final game, because I think they've had a fantastic February to this point. Like, one of the big things that we wanted to see was them to learn from some of their mistakes and start capitalizing against these bad teams, actually putting them away, kind of having that killer mentality. That hurdle has been cleared. Now the next hurdle for me is or at least if you're trying to come up with an agenda for the rest of the regular season or a wish list, the next hurdle is capitalizing on one of these upcoming games against better teams.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. You know, I think that they've shown me enough to show that, like, I kind of think they can compete in any of these games. You know, in fact, I really, to your point that you've made a couple times, they just never get absolutely run off the floor and run out of the building this whole season. And I feel like in their other marquee games where they've had an opportunity, they've mostly stayed connected. You know, like last night was really one of the few times where like they were really kind of getting boat raced. So I think they've shown enough there. You know, I think the questions remain because they're young and because of the shooting. And it does feel like it's just, I mean, it feels like the bigger the game, the more I'm not sure about the shooting. And they have to like work really hard in spite of it. You know, I mean, we probably should talk. I'll tell you one person I want to talk about that making me a little antsy is our boy Dean Wade. Just been straight up invisible the last few games and getting the appropriately cut minutes to match that. And I don't know what to make of that. You know, they've really invested a lot in Dean Wade being that guy who gets all the backup 4 minutes. And then a healthy chunk of minutes at the 3, and right now he's not really showing it. Obviously, still coming off that injury, but I really want to see a little bit more out of Dean now that he's back and coming. You know, after he gets another few, gets a week to just kind of rest, recover, get even more up to speed. I want to see what that does for him because he's really, really important for this team. And, with the reported news, more so than ever because they're losing their break glass in case of emergency option.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. And the Cavs might not be proven against some of these best teams in the East just yet, but that can't be said for our video conferencing software. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Carter, I know anecdotally we've kind of said that the Cavs don't get blown out against these teams and they're always right there, and some of these close losses are part of why you get increased frustration in these games. But it was really funny looking it up on Cleaning the Glass to see how the Cavs perform against teams with a top 10 point differential in the NBA. Cavs, of course, are second on that list. Yeah. They're second in point differential, I should say, but they're fourth in net rating against top 10 teams in the NBA. So doing very well there. Right now, the funny aspect of that, though, is they are eighth in winning percentage against top 10 teams. So fourth in net rating, but eighth in winning percentage with a 9-10 record. And that kind of goes to show, like, they stick around in a lot of these games and they don't have kind of those blowout losses against the top teams. If you want to filter it down further to just the top 5 teams in point differential, the Cavs actually have a winning record. They're 5-4 against those teams and 4-6 against teams 6 through 10. So it's funny. It's one of those interesting things to look at, but kind of goes to what you were saying earlier, which is if you say they don't have any good wins against good teams, it's just not true. They've actually performed really well. It's just some of those small issues when it comes down to execution that seem to leave them with, just that little bitter taste in your mouth in some of these games.
Yeah, and you want to just see, and like you do want to see them start to, like, if you have designs on them being like a no doubt second round team that is not going to struggle, and a team that is at least going to take Milwaukee or Boston to 6 or 7 games, what you have to see them do is win 2 or 3 kind of statement games in a row. I think that's the other thing. I think it's very like off on, off on, off on, which is like about what you'd expect for a team of this pedigree and experience. But like, I think we both, David on the pod earlier in the week, I thought said it best, where he's like, it's fair to start expecting some things of this team because we think they're that good. And so seeing them string a few wins against elite teams together would go a really, really long way in giving us confidence that they are ready to challenge Milwaukee, that they're not going to, maybe fight through a first round series against the Knicks or against the Nets or something like that, and then get absolutely blitzed off the floor by a more experienced team. That they're going to have to prove that. And I don't know if they're going to be able to get me all the way confident in that in the regular season, like, just because playoffs are such a different beast. But I think it would go a long way towards providing some of that reassurance.
Yeah, I completely agree. And for me, I'd actually love to get your thoughts on this, Carter, because when I look at an NBA season, I really compartmentalize it. Like, I always break it down when it comes to the Cavs. Regular season and playoffs, if they are a playoff year. Is the regular season a success? Which to me is, did I have a lot of fun watching this team? Did they keep me engaged on a lot of nights, even in games that they lost? Did I feel something in those games? I feel like at this point, the regular season is going to be a success. Even if the Cavs, with the 5th easiest schedule left, to get to 50 wins, which is not easy to do in the NBA, they'd have to go 12-9. I think they're going to get to 50 wins. I think they got a good chance at hitting my prediction of 53 wins from the preseason. I would consider this regular season a success. So my mentality has already shifted to, how are they positioning themselves for the playoffs? Because I think the expectation, this team's good enough to earn the expectation that this team wins around, especially after looking at the trade deadline moves with Brooklyn. New York did get better. I think they did legitimately get better with Josh Hart, but I'd still expect the Cavs to win that series. I think the expectation should be to win one round. So how are they ironing out some of these bad habits? Are they looking more cohesive in these big games? And the interesting thing too, from a scheduling standpoint, is if you're talking about measuring stick games against the other top 10 teams in point differential, they all come right after the break. And then the schedule gets really easy to close the season. So we're going to find out, like, we have a very limited period of time to figure out how the Cavs are doing against those teams and to see some potential growth in those matchups.
Brother, you look at the end of the season, this team should actually end the season on a 6-game winning streak. Like, if they don't, it like you know how I am about shoulds. I try to be very careful about should wins, and I'm exceedingly careful about should have 6-game win streaks. And you look at it, and it's versus Houston. I'm sorry, 7-game versus Houston, at Atlanta, versus New York, versus Indiana, at Orlando, versus Charlotte. Like, those are all, with the exception of like maybe the versus New York and the Atlanta stretch, which have a healthy amount of rest between them. Like, man, they are in a really, really good spot. You mentioned the 50-game mark as a not meaningless benchmark. I have to go back to my favorite stat in the NBA. The Washington professional basketball franchise has not won 50 games since 1979. So not everyone is so lucky, and it's not so easy.
This is a very GOAT-friendly podcast because we've already credited Ben Golliver, and now we're tearing out the heart of our dear friend Andrew Sharp.
Well, I didn't mention Johnny Davis, so I think
Speaking of us being wildly wrong,
I'll tell you what,
goodness, that poor guy.
Yeah, yeesh. So ultimately, I think they're in a really good spot. Should we talk a little bit about Danny Green impressions? What did you? I did not expect him to play, but Jetty got hurt and Ricky was ill, and Danny Green got some run.
Yeah, and as you mentioned before, Dean wasn't particularly effective either, and I think we share a sentiment there that hopefully this week off helps him and everyone on the team feel a lot better. But Danny Green, definitely was not expecting him to play. Excited to see him out there in a Cavs jersey and hit a three. I thought his feet looked heavy running up and down the court. It reminded me a lot of that Ricky Rubio debut where Ricky threw some like wild passes and you're like, oh my God, like the smarts are all there and everything like that. But he just was moving at the pace of a normal mortal. And I think like sometimes NBA athleticism always just kind of stands out. Like you're comparing it to other NBA athletes and Danny Green just doesn't seem to be there just yet. He looked very slow, like a normal human moving up and down the court. I'm sure we'd look hilariously slow if we were out there. But the benefit is that there are 2 more months, right, before the NBA playoffs, even though it feels like it's right around the corner and there's 21 games and this is going to be now going from a marathon to a sprint. It still is 2 months of real time for him to kind of get his sea legs under him. And, if you're talking about prototypical 3-and-D players, Danny Green is the textbook definition of that. Like if you want to build a statue to the 3-and-D player, he might be the greatest of all time, depending on where you put those qualifiers. So it is really exciting to have him back on the team. I love that as a buyout addition. I would have been thrilled with a trade for Danny Green. So I'm happy to have him on the team, but I'm keeping my expectations similar to my stance with Ricky Rubio. Like I'm keeping my expectations reasonable until I actually see him go out there and contribute at a high level.
I think it's really important to note with Danny that he tore his ACL 3 months after Ricky Rubio tore his ACL.
Didn't he tear another ligament in
his LCL, I believe.
Oh my goodness.
He is not on the same, even though he's playing already, he is not on the same recovery timetable as Ricky, despite being older by a couple years. So I do think like it's going to take him a minute. I do think that extra 2 months is going to be nice, and it's not like the Cavs are going to need to tax him too much, at least as currently constituted. I think
he's going to catch some DNPs. Let's be honest.
For sure. But I did already see some stuff just with his brain and his. Let me preface: Danny Green might be my favorite role player in the history of the league. Yes. You know this. I've always loved his game. I think he is just a brilliant player. I think his the way he uses his length on defense, the way he was blowing up Dwayne Wade, LeBron James 2-on-1 fast breaks during peak Heatles era, just by being a smart transition defender, was amazing. His ability to be a movement 3-point shooter, his grit defensively, and his ability to guard up or down depending on kind of who he needs to guard. A proven winner, 3-time champion on 3 separate teams. I just really love his game. I always have. I'm so excited he's on the team. Even if he never recaptures his past glory, I'm still thrilled to have him on the team, just at a sentimental level, because I've always loved his game. With that said, the way he moves and the way he kind of navigates and transition to those corners, the way he's kind of constantly flowing and relocating, that's certain stuff that the Cavs just don't have a lot of guys that are doing. Darius missed Danny like 3 times on a wide open threes in that game. And I think part of the reason why I kind of caveated his otherwise very strong game is that like there were a couple plays where Danny had relocated in the corner behind him and Darius just like went and took a pull up, and I'm like, Darius, find your new friend. And
so this is your way of coming out as someone that's manning one of those player Twitter accounts where you just I just love Darius every time he misses Danny Green.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna notice, that's for damn sure. And I think he has a lot to teach these guys. He talked about wanting to mentor Isaac in his practice availability before the game. And I just think the way he sees the geometry of the floor as a role player is really, really strong. And I left that game feeling like Danny has a part to play on the court for the Cavs this season, even knowing that there are some significant hurdles to get there.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm racking my brain right now, and this is probably going to be one of those spots where I realize a name after the podcast and feel silly. But when was the last time we really had a veteran wing, like to actually mentor some young guys?
Corver,
like
maybe.
Yeah, like it really has been a long time that the Cavs have gone.
Yeah, remember when Kyle Korver taught Jetty how to shoot free throws or whatever it was?
Yeah,
it was really cute.
Yeah, but I think you're right. Like that's going to be something where when they go into the film sessions and they break this down, like Danny's going to be pointing that stuff out to Darius, right? Like it's just going to help kind of evolve his understanding of where guys can be, mentoring Isaac Okoro on how to move off ball, which has already been one of I think the largest areas of growth for him this year is moving off ball. But having Danny Green there to point those things out, I think adds a lot of value. If someone would have told you in the offseason that at some point this year you're going to be rooting for a team with Howell Neto and Danny Green, what
brother,
would your reaction have been?
I didn't even that. You're so spot on. It is. They're just Kobe is just collecting my favorites, and I love Robin Lopez too. I know Robin has had a bit of a more up and down season in his court appearances than the other two, but I feel like Kobe has really done a nice job of looking for players that really complement this young starting lineup. If, like I've said it a billion times, but if you're gonna have 5 dudes in their mid to early 20s in your starting lineup, you'd better have some wily old vets flanking them. And even if the reports end up playing out as reported, the Cavs still have so much sage advice on this bench, and Danny Green, Howell Neto, Robin Lopez, guys who have been around.
Ricky Rubio.
Ricky Rubio. Like guys who have been around and like know what it takes to win, that JB can turn to and help settle the team down. I just think they have enough there to kind of that can kind of counterbalance their inexperience in the short term. And again, that's why I think a guy like Danny Green has a real chance to contribute in the postseason, because at some point JB is going to see the proverbial stuff hitting the fan and go, Danny, get in there. Mm-hmm. I just know that deep in my core, whether or not his body is up to the task, only time will tell. But I don't know. Call me a hopeless optimist, but I got a good feeling about it.
Yeah, and at the very least, it's a good presence to have in the locker room, right? Like there is an upside to that, and if you're talking about needle movers for the Cavs, the only thing that's going to move the needle from the Cavs being a fringe contender to an actual contender is internal growth of the core four. And honestly, I'd extend it to Isaac Okoro as well, because now
he's starting,
yeah, like he's starting, and I mean, the way he's trending, it's actually really nice and refreshing to see now. All the advanced stats on defense are really picking up Okoro. Like I think I saw B-Ball Index had him as a top 2 defender for his age group, and still kind of up in that like 90th percentile. And those lineups are working, right? So having guys that can get in their ears, help them out in practice in those film sessions, I think that all makes a big difference. I think in a perfect world, you'd like to have at least one more vet that's a little more ready to contribute on court, like a prime Danny Green that's just kind of that knockdown shooter. But that opportunity just hasn't been available yet, and you hope it happens at some time. But I do think that there is a real value of having someone like that. And honestly, even though we talk about the guys at the top end, I feel like having Danny Green is also a good guy for Dean Wade to learn from as well, because at the start of the year, he was really starting to add some of that movement shooting to his game. And I think that's
just taking him.
Right. So hopefully he gets healthy if he's not healthy, or at least regains his confidence if he is healthy. And this is just kind of him trying to find his footing again. But having Danny Green to kind of point out how to move on the floor, where the right spots are to be as a spacer, because that's the way that Dean can scale up his game from being a more D than 3 player at this point to kind of a true 3 and D option that is pretty versatile when you look at what he can do defensively.
Yeah, in October, Dean was taking 4 threes a game on 24 minutes. In November, that dropped to 3.1. Didn't play almost all of December. In January, still at 3.2. And now he's taking 2.3 in his 18 minutes a game. So, you just want to see, you really need to see him getting 3-4 shots up every time he's out there from 3. I just think that just seems to be something that the staff really needs to coach him to do. And who knows if the shoulder is still affecting him, but again, I think Green just has so much to teach this group, just about how to be an off-ball player who really still attracts a lot of attention. There is so much craft to being in that spot, to the subtle relocations that makes your guy take 2 seconds to pay attention to where you're going, so he's not helping on Donnie or Darius. Like, it's such a beautiful game, and that kind of expertise really, really matters. And I'm excited to see how it is imparted on this very young group.
Mm-hmm. And it's nice to get this addition prior to the All-Star break as well, right? Because you're going to have that week off. You're going to get kind of reintegrated. It's really interesting listening to Donovan Mitchell on Wine and Gold Radio, just hearing the difference between his first All-Star appearance, where he went broke our hearts taking the dunk contest from Larry Nance Jr. And he talked about how he had a really bad post All-Star stretch because he was just so exhausted after that, and just learning about really prioritizing rest, trying to manage your flights so you're not taking a whole bunch of flights to and from whatever destinations you're going to. And I just think having those vets, having the Cavs fresh in their minds of, hey, this is when everything kind of went off the rails for us, and obviously injuries were a big part of it, but that this team's going to want to finish strong, because it's better than it was last year, 61 games in. They're 15 games over 500 rather than 11 games through 61 games, but they still got some work ahead of them. And even if you don't win these head-to-head games against Philly, there's only one more left. I still think, looking at the schedules, the most likely way for this to play out, I think, is for the Cavs to end up as the 3 seed, because they do have one of the easiest schedules, and Philly does have the hardest in the league.
I think they got to beat Philly to catch up, because I think Philly's playing really good ball right now. And even though you look at some of the really rough games on Philly's schedule, I think they might win a few more of those than we think they will, just because I just think the top of the East is peaking at the right time. And I think you got to win that, because that baits, if you lose that, you're basically functionally 3 back without the tiebreaker. Like you have, that's just a lot of ground to make up in 20 games against a team who's not going to be losing a ton of theirs.
There is a month until then, right? Like the Cavs have played 4 more
but I'm just
games.
saying, like, functionally, it's just another loss back in the loss column. So I'm excited to see how it goes. I do think that they're at home in that Philly game. I think they should be plenty motivated coming off of how that game went on national TV, and it's going to be fun.
The schedule guy and cut you off, but part of why I was really disappointed with this loss was
back to back.
Not only that, it's 3 games in 4 nights, and Philly's going to have 2 days off prior to that game in Cleveland, while the Cavs are on the road back to back. So
now counter, it is a 3 game and 4 night, but it is a baseball series. It is 2 in Charlotte, and ideally, that's going to be one of those. Hey, do you want to be a team that can compete for the 3 seed? Well, then take care of Charlotte in the first half and don't play your guys more than 30 minutes.
100%. Let's see if they learn some of the lessons from earlier in the year and take care of business against a Charlotte team that is not very good. LaMelo is playing out of his mind right now, but them as a team overall have not been good. But I'm interested, man, because this stretch right after the All-Star break, there's a lot of big games. Like right off the bat, you play Denver, you play Boston twice. After that, you have a back-to-back in Miami. Then you got Philly on March 15th, and after that stretch, there's no real games that stand out as this is their chance to make a statement win. It's Denver, Boston twice, Miami twice, and Philly. If you don't win some of those games, people are inevitably going to have questions about what this team can do if they do advance in the playoffs, or maybe even have questions about how they would do in round one. I have a pretty high level of confidence, but I think it's fair, right? Like as David said, they've kind of earned the right to have expectations, and I'm sure they're going to hold themselves to a higher standard than we ever will. But these are those moments where you can start to say, hey, remember when we didn't start off great against Boston at the start of March, but we rallied. We ended up winning that game by 10. These were some of the adjustments we made. Like getting that muscle memory heading into the playoffs, I think would be significant.
Yeah, it's worth noting that the Grizzlies, who a lot of people really love, well, not so much these days, but who a lot of people loved all last year, and think very highly of this year. Last year, they locked up the 2 seed, riding high. This weird Minnesota team gets out of the play-in and plays them in the first round, and basically is up by like 15 points in every single game against Memphis and just blows it. Like Memphis worked their butts off to win a first round series against a very, very flawed Minnesota team. So I think that even if the Cavs lock up the 3 or the 4 seed, like I'm certainly not going to come in with any I'm going to come in with appropriate fear. I'm not going to come in with this, oh, well, they should handle a Brooklyn Nets team that's just stocked with 46 3-and-D players. They should handle a New York Knicks team that has, by the way, is just chock full of playoff tested players at this point. They're going to have to work, and it's not going to be easy. That's not how the playoffs go until you earn it, or if you have LeBron James in his prime. Like most of the time, you gotta really grind out a series until you have the requisite miles.
Yeah, and even looking at the Cavs last time going to the playoffs, they won 11 of the last 14 games in 2018, and then you get into a hellacious series against the Indiana Pacers, where if you don't get a throwback Tristan Thompson performance in Game 7, you lose in the first round, right? Like, I definitely think there is something to the regular season not really being indicative to the playoffs, but it's kind of like when we talk about Isaiah Mobley killing it in the G League. It's much better to see him doing that than not. We don't know how it's going to translate, but you still kind of want to see it. So I want to see them do well in these games, right? And I'm still calling my shot. I'm saying 3 seed. I didn't get to victory lap during this winning streak. I know I left saying I just feel like the Cavs are really close to putting it together, and we got a couple winning streaks left in us. It's probably for the best that I didn't get to do a victory lap. I'm so obnoxious when that happens.
Well, one thing, Justin, that you have to realize that if you take away their 8-game winning streak to start the season, and you take away the 7-game winning streak that they just had, they'd be 23. They'd be 23 and 23, and if you take away that 5-game one, they'd be 18 and 23. So really, we're looking at an 18 and 23 level basketball team, Justin. And I think you got to be concerned after giving up what they gave up for Donovan Mitchell to only be playing 18 and 23 level basketball.
God, you're a dick. I love it. You know what? I just realized I was calling you a dick for doing that, and I had done the same thing on Twitter.
I know.
I just jump on you for any opportunity that I get, but it's great to be podcasting back with you again, man. It's a lot of fun. I wish we didn't have to wait so long for basketball.
Again, I missed you, but it's really the work that you do that is like, oh my God, I have to do a rundown. I have to upload the audio afterwards. I have to insert mid-roll ads. Pass. Buddy, you can stay as long as you want. I will never seek greener pastures.
Well, honestly, what we might need to figure out is how to get me living in Mexico and just get a podcast set up there, because apparently we don't lose when I'm away.
Absolutely not.
As being a superstitious person, that's going to be on the forefront of my mind. And stop giving away the secret sauce. I put a lot of work in to make it look like I'm not doing any work or anything.
I know, buddy, but you're wonderful and I missed you.
I miss doing this too, and I missed all of our listeners. It's great to be back talking Cavs. We'll have some shows over the break as well. I believe we'll end up doing a mailbag. Seems like a great time to do that. So big thanks to everyone that's tuning in live on YouTube. Big thanks to everyone listening on podcasts as well. If you want to support us on YouTube, like, subscribe, click notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chase Down's exclusive Discord chats, send a screenshot that review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.